Did I get you? That was my hope. I hope that you were scared, because that is what I have found over the years has been the best introduction to the endocrine system. So normally we're in class and I enlist the help of one of your peers to jump out of something. There would be some kind of a jump scare in class. Hopefully this one got you like that one typically does. So if you want to scare your friends, this is the link to that scare video. I did it with my brother when it first came out years ago, because this is old. Hopefully you haven't seen it before. But I think he peed a little. It's kind of funny. Okay, so that fight or flight reaction, if you experienced it, that came from your kidney hats. So remember, the adrenal glands sit right on top of the kidneys. And if it didn't get you, I would imagine you've been scared before. So I want you to think of the last time you were driving along, and then all of a sudden a cop pulls in behind you. And it doesn't matter really if you're going the speed limit, like your tags are good. I'm trying to think what else they would get you for. Like if you're following all the rules, it doesn't matter. Like your body goes, what do I need to do? Like you turn down the radio, like that helps. And the whole idea is like you're on alert, essentially. So that was an adrenaline release when you felt that. That adrenaline release basically starts the fight or flight reaction. What are you going to do? Now you're scared. What are you going to do? So I'll maybe throw in another video that like demonstrates this really well. But essentially what you're going to do, it's a protective measure to go, there's a threat. So maybe our great grandma had to run from a lion or something, and or maybe she was really tough and she fought the lion. But either way, if she fought it or she ran from it, it was the adrenaline that triggered that reaction. And then there's a negative feedback loop. So noradrenaline will be released, so the body will go back to normal. So I'm going to stick here for 1 second, because cortisol is also released from the adrenal glands, and that's a stress hormone. So a lot of times when we were in the clinic and we were dealing with a patient that couldn't control their weight, we started asking questions about, what's your sleep schedule like? Are you managing your stress? Are you meditating? Are you doing some breathing exercises? Are you exercising? And if they're not controlling their stress, then the adrenal glands will release cortisol, and that can cause weight gain. So if your schedule's off now because we're in quarantine, you could be doing damage to your glands. So get on a schedule. Okay, this picture is goofy and weird, but I was looking for something that was, not offensive. We don't need to see everything on every picture. So I just wanted you to have an overview of what we're going to cover. So there are glands located throughout the body, and that's what this picture is showing us, the different glands. Some of them are related to fight or flight, some of them related to regulating the metabolism, one really regulating sleep, and then we have like reproductive hormones. And the only one on this picture that I'm not going to go into more depth is the parathyroid. That just goes a little more in depth than we need. Okay, within our curriculum, we have strands, and strands are going to be like big picture items. Some of them are about regulating the system, or some of them are about the foundational parts of the body. So this was in strand 4, and so I've kind of skipped back to this one because we were, if you remember, we were in strand 5, and now we've gone back to 4. And the reason I do that is because, to me, for my brain, it works better to go endocrine first and then reproductive next. So that's the way I'm going to do it. So these are the exact standards. So it goes strand 4. I'm trying to remember what they named it. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. And then the standards are these verbatim. So identify the basic functions. We're going to locate stuff, and we're going to talk about diseases and disorders. Although I'm leaving the diseases and disorders for next time, because this appears to be a long one. Okay, so standard 7 then comes up first. With standard 7, the endocrine system is made up of glands that make hormones. So I threw in this kind of elementary picture for it so you can kind of see the basic idea. We have a secreting cell that will release a hormone. That hormone will enter into the bloodstream. It's a chemical messenger. So it's almost like the cells are like, hey, on an email, hey, I need this cell to do this. Send. And then it goes into the bloodstream instead of sending an email like we would. It's going to send an email through, it's going to send a signal through the bloodstream. So the hormone enters the bloodstream via a blood vessel, so a capillary, and then it goes to a target cell, and the target cell has to have the right receptor. So let's say in this picture, we've got little green circles representing the hormones, and we have little purple receptors that have, that's, like those shape things, like a circle goes in a circle, square goes in a square. Some people have a hard time with that, but if it fits the receptor, then that target cell will accept the hormone and whatever messages that it was trying to send, and it will probably cause the cell to do something else. Okay, so these are the glands that we will cover, and we'll cover a lot of the hormones that happen in the body that get released in the body. This is certainly not going to be an extensive list, and this is a complicated system, so we're going to kind of scratch the surface, and then as you get higher up in your education, you will go into more depth. Click. Okay. Starting at the top, we have the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland is often called the master gland because it releases a laundry list of hormones and it causes different changes throughout the body. But the hypothalamus is maybe like the master of the master because it does, even though it doesn't do a ton, a lot of times it's the hypothalamus that sort of goes, pituitary, we need this done. So it's almost like the pituitary is like, if I could give it a good analogy, like the executive secretary of the hypothalamus. And if you look behind the scenes, maybe this executive secretary does a lot more than the boss does. And it seems to me, that's kind of the way I look at it. What I have decided in teaching anatomy over the years is that this system, I think it rules them all. I mean, you've got the nervous system that kind of does, it does, but you can have so many brain changes from hormones that I'm almost convinced that endocrine rules the nervous even, but that's an opinion. So, hypothalamus located there in the midbrain. So you can see there's the thalamus and the corpus callosum. This is a sagittal cut of the brain. You can see the arbor vitae. Do you remember from the cerebellum? But right there's the hypothalamus, and then just below that, I'll just shake it with my mouse, the pituitary gland. So the hypothalamus functions mainly to control for homeostasis. And so homeostasis, essentially, like how are we taking in calories and using them up? It's your metabolism. So a lot of times people say, well, it's just a matter of calories in, calories out. And it kind of is to an extent, but sometimes hormones can make a play and it can cause real havoc in the system. So homeostasis, we also have endocrine control via the pituitary. Like I said, it's like the hypothalamus is like, hey, pituitary, I need this to happen. And so it will kind of splash down a hormone that says, pituitary, do something. And then pituitary will release other things. It gives you autonomic control, so for sensory information, and then some limbic functions. So remember, limbic system is essentially where emotions are housed. So in a forensic setting, typically midbrain, you've got prefrontal cortex problems with people who, this doesn't necessarily apply to intro, but maybe you're interested. Prefrontal cortex problems with people who tend to be serial killers. Also, limbic lobe, midbrain problems have been noted. So on the right of this slide, you can see there are all these different pituitary hormones in kind of a wheel fashion. So we're going to go ahead. If you look at the kidney hats are going to be all about your fight or flight reaction and stress hormones. And then if we just go clockwise from there, oxytocin is actually a hormone that's released, so women will produce milk. We have growth hormones like, growth hormone is released for the bones and other places that need stimulating. And then we've got melanocyte is going to be the color in the skin, so melanocyte stimulating, thyroid stimulating. Thyroid is big for metabolism. Prolactin also for milk. LH and FSH will basically start off when those are released. You'll see puberty hit. Kids start to go through a real rough time in junior high. Okay, so lots of different glands. We'll come back to a couple of those. So another one I didn't touch on, antidiuretic, is going to be one that's going to regulate the water in your system. So next gland is in the brain again. So we had the pituitary, hypothalamus over here. The pineal gland is back here over by the cerebellum. And some people call it the third eye because of where it's located, and it's sensitive to light. So this one regulates melatonin. So it's important for sleep. So just so you guys kind of understand how much sleep you should be getting. And in this time frame, you should be getting a lot of sleep. I know I've got a couple of CNAs out there, but I don't think any of my sophomores are CNAs. But this one's important for your sleep. So you should be getting about 9 or 10 hours a night. And we do release melatonin. Our own brain releases melatonin, but sometimes we get off. If our schedules are off, you can take a low dose melatonin, but you shouldn't take it forever. You should just take it just till you get back to regular. Okay, next gland is our thyroid gland. It's a butterfly-shaped gland that's basically located at the base of the neck. And this is going to regulate metabolism. So this one is rough because we could get values. A lot of times it was women that would come into our clinic and they would be like, hey, I exercise, I eat right, I'm even tracking my sleep, and I still am having some struggles with my diet and exercise. And a lot of times we would sit them down and go, let's see really what you eat. Because most of the time people are just so unaware of how much they're putting into their bodies. They don't really pay attention to calories, which is a big mistake, especially as you get older. And sometimes though, we've come across women who are like, yeah, they're tracking it accurate, and you can tell they've kept a pretty extensive diary and everything. And at that point, we usually will be like, well, let's go ahead and check your thyroid. And if their thyroid has like T3 or T4 issues, so those hormones are listed here. I can say thyroxine, but the other one also, I'm just going to call T3. Those regulate metabolism. So if we have a patient who is struggling to keep weight off, that you have other exceptions where or some cases where maybe the thyroid hormones are too much, but for women, especially middle-aged women who are going like, my body's just not doing what it used to, we would test their thyroid, and they might need a little, they might need something to get their body back to normal that helps them regulate those hormones. Okay, some more glands that you need to know about. We have a thymus that sits right under the sternum here, and that's going to produce T cells that are critical to the immune system. So when we get into the reproductive system, we are going to talk about HIV and AIDS, and T cells and B cells, which are not on this slide, a lot of times are coming from the thymus, and if they're not able to fight with those cells, it actually makes it pretty detrimental. So the thymus is where that's produced. We also have the pancreas. So I want you to, I'm just going to draw attention to this right here. Here's the gallbladder. So we know the gallbladder is, the liver is going to be like right here. This is where the small intestine is. And this is where we want the work of absorption to happen. So we've cranked it out in the stomach. We've churned it. And then we've had gastric juices kind of going at it. And then it's released into the small intestine. Well, the gallbladder will release substances, gall, that will break down and emulsify fats. And the pancreas will actually work to regulate sugar. So it releases insulin and glucagon. So when we get to diseases and disorders, we'll talk about that some more as it relates to diabetes. Okay, and then finally, last of the day is the reproductive glands. So the testes sit in the scrotum in the men, and those are, testes are the actual gonads. So that's the sex organ, and they produce sperm and they secrete hormones, but primarily testosterone is the one we're concerned of. So we get when we get LH and FSH released, for especially the women, you'll see like menstrual cycle will start to happen, secondary sex characteristics as well, and puberty will happen. And it will be from a signal from the pituitary that goes down to these gonads and says, time to be more active. So we can start to get our secondary sex characteristics, which include, like, for women, like the hourglass figure, and for guys, kind of the broad shoulders and tapered waist kind of look that comes because of the hormone profiles that we have. Ovaries are located in the low abdomen, and they produce estrogen and progesterone, which are protective for those little eggs being produced in that particular gonad. So that's our start for the hormones, basically. So I hope you guys are good as always. I have found a lot of the messages you're sending me, like a couple of them, like in announcements, I just barely found there were some messages people were sending. It doesn't flag me. Canvas is dumb, but it doesn't flag me when I get those. So if you have a legit question for me, email it, because I get those right on my phone. Canvas doesn't flag me for a lot of the messages that you're throwing out on like an assignment or whatever. Sometimes I have to just, when I'm grading, I'll see those. But if you write it after I've graded it or something like that, it doesn't flag me. So I don't even know it's there. So if you would just go to my email and just let me know what you need. And we'll see you next time. We'll go over diseases and disorders next time.